Hello, this is Darren Pulsipher, Chief Solution Architect of Public Sector at Intel, and welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. On today's episode, Precog Cyber Attack Paths with Paul Giorgi from XM Cyber. Hey, Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Darren.
Hey, Paul Giorgi is a director of sales in XM Cyber. When I first heard about XM Cyber, I was like, I don't quite understand. And then you guys coached me and taught me. And I was like, this is cool stuff.
Yeah.
So before we get into what you guys do, tell me, Paul, a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you ended up at XM Cyber.
Yeah, so I've been in security since the late 90s, started doing a lot of DHS and DoD projects. That was where I got my start. It was a great place to learn and have kind of an unlimited budget to just do whatever I wanted to kind of secure the perimeter. And I started there, ended up coming over and joining a company called Fishnet Security, doing sales engineering, and that was back in 2005. And then I fell in love with sales engineering. If you would have asked the one who was managing the firewalls, Paul, who was managing the firewalls back then, if I'd ever get into anything sales related, I'd be like disgusted by the idea. But I love sales engineering, and so I really fell in love with it at Fishnet, and then my career has been kind of tied within sales engineering. Worked at a few different places. I participated as a co-founder of a cybersecurity company called Defy Security. I worked at Exabeam, so I love logs. One thing I've always played around with is breach and attack simulation. I think that that's an emerging space the last few years that I fell in love with, and XM Cyber falls within that category. And so when I was looking for the next kind of adventure, I was like, I want to do breach and attack simulation, and then I surveyed, and I really fell in love with what XM Cyber was doing and their unique take. And so that's how I ended up here.
Okay, for those of you that don't know what breach, simulation and attack simulation, you're dealing with black hat, white hat type of things going on here, right?
Yeah,
let's be serious. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's categories of breach and attack simulation. Like you can automate pen tests. So if you want every single day to run a pen test in your environment, that is a category of breach and attack simulation. And then there's what we call security control validations, where if you're using CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Microsoft Defender or Silence or whatever the EDR tool is, and you want to make sure that your solution's blocking specific type of variants, you can launch things that look and simulate those type of behaviors to see, is my policy protecting me? Or if it is protecting me, are my playbooks working the way I anticipate them? So there's definite value in those type of use cases. We don't really address either one of those kind of to the extent that our competitors do. We do what's called attack path management. And attack path management is just holistically assessing your environment and giving you insight into how an attacker might leverage entities in your environment to laterally move and compromise critical assets.
Okay, so this is different than what we hear traditionally about cyber, right?
Yeah.
Traditionally, it's detection, remediation, prevention. Those are the typical things. You guys are doing like predictive. How can they get in? If they do get in, where can they go? Type of thing. So you're like, what's the right word? It's like it's not like going to the doctor. It's going to the gym.
Kind of, yeah. I've used the analogy of like a precog sim, where it's
great, precog. Now we got Minority Report going on.
I felt like that's been a good description, where it's like we're not correlating a whole bunch of things that are happening. We're correlating a lot of stuff that could happen then stringing them together, a imaginative incident, giving you insight into how your tools might be able to address it, how you could work to address remediations on specific choke points. And then if you think about an organization who learns a lot from a pen test, like back when I was doing the DoD projects, and I was working at an Air Force base, every quarter we would have a pen test, and they would always get us. And it would be so frustrating that we'd spent so much time fixing stuff. But my favorite time was we would get around a conference table and they would all share around, hey, we did this, and we did this. And then immediately I would respond and address all of the things that they were doing to fix it. And there was so much we learned during those incidences. So that's what we're trying to do, but on a regular basis, and something where you can fix things today, see the impact of them tomorrow, and then continually increase and improve your security.
So this can happen well before pen testing then, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the
ideally.
idea.
There was even
Right?
one customer
So,
who,
so here's a question then,
yeah,
right? Could you have your red team use your stuff to find their way around the blue team and then go to town, right?
yeah. So we actually have that use case deployed in some
So
customers.
your tool could be very dangerous
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what we're doing, I use the
if in the
analogy a
wrong
lot,
hands,
like,
right, Paul?
yeah, exactly. Like Google Maps, for example, is a good analogy where it's like, hey, I want to get from one place to the next place. Here's my starting point, here's my ending point. Google Maps will tell you these are all the ways to get there. We do that same thing, but from an attack simulation. We're saying, hey, if you've compromised this Azure Active Directory user account, these are the 6 steps that you can take in this order to be able to get to like an on-premise domain controller and compromise that critical asset. So just like Google Maps will say, this is the route that we recommend you take. This is the one that avoids tolls. This one's the most scenic route. We do that same thing. We'll tell you these are the 6 ways to get from this point to this point. And if you think about how that would help a red teamer, it makes them super efficient. They don't have to waste time poking around and trying to do discovery. They say, this is where I'm at. I want to get over here. XM, tell me how to get there. And so, yeah, you're right. It is kind of scary being able to show all of that data in one specific view.
Well, yeah, you're going to enable the red team, but hey, you can also give it to the blue team too. So I guess that's the next question, right? You guys run all these predictive attack path analysis, and so what do I do? You give me all that information. What do I do with it?
Yeah,
what
so
can
there's
I do
a
with it?
few
From the
things.
blue team perspective.
From a blue team perspective, you can now prioritize your remediations. If we are showing you the entities that are allowing an attacker to most commonly compromise your critical assets, you want to focus your remediations on those. So we call them choke points, and think about a choke point as, hey, if I have 400 attack paths all going to different areas in my DMZ, but all 400 seem to have to leverage this one entity to make that attack path happen.
This one
if I
entity, got
just
it.
fix that one problem on that one entity, I've really destroyed 400 attack paths. So from a blue teamer, it allows you to prioritize your efforts and making sure that you've locked down these choke points that could enable an attacker. We know that if an attacker is able to get something like a domain admin account or get onto a machine like a domain controller, there's a lot of stuff that they can wreak havoc on. They basically own the environment at that point. But in most environments, there are accounts or entities that are riskier than your domain admin account. And without having any insight, you don't know what those are. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of like a developer account who has rights from a federated identity in Google and Azure. And from that one account, you're able to get access to all these things. And that's more powerful than a domain admin account. Or think about an Intune admin or just a regular domain user who has rights to use the Intune admin service. They could push software to any Azure Active Directory admin machines or Azure Active Directory domain machines and push software. So that one account is even more dangerous than domain admin because it sits above another layer, but then has the ability to replicate down. So it's an interesting perspective to now start seeing what other accounts even introduce more risk than a domain admin account.
All right, so I got to back you up a little bit because my listeners' heads are spinning now, right? So I want to kind of break this down a little bit. You're talking about attack paths, so
Yep.
and then you were talking about user accounts. So
Yeah.
obviously, in your past stuff, there's more than just user accounts. There's more than just what's connected to what and what firewalls are. So how would you break down? I mean, let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
I've
Sure.
got identity management as one of the things. So that's one of the things that you guys leverage is, hey, who is who in the zoo?
Yep.
Not just in my data center, but it also sounds like in the cloud.
Yep.
So you guys can handle multi-cloud access management or you're analyzing the access. You're not doing the access management. You're analyzing it.
Correct. Yep.
Is that okay? So that's the identity side. So this is going to be, if I have multiple identities, is there any way for you to track that I am using multiple identities or not? Is that just outside the realm?
So we wouldn't, I mean, we don't care who owns what, but if you've ever used a tool called Bloodhound, they are doing the same thing that we're doing. We actually have the same exact features, but kind of at a much larger level, where if you have access to a specific Active Directory user, we understand that this Active Directory user can reset the password for another one. And now this user account has the ability to now add a GPO. And then from that GPO, we can then do so. Sometimes attack paths will be 10 steps long, but 9 steps will all just be navigating the identity world. And it's all just due to you might have permissions to your admin account, and then that admin account might have additional permissions. So if you do 6 or 7 steps, adjusting groups and adjusting just different permissions and resetting passwords and deploying GPOs, you could kind of take 9 steps to go from standard Darren's user account to then get to the point where you're at domain admin just by leveraging Active Directory.
Wow, most people don't even know that's
Yeah.
an attack path.
And it gets even more
Right?
complex
I mean,
when you pull in
obviously,
cloud identities. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine because cloud identities, even though they try and sync them up between,
Yeah.
they're unique identities, right? They're
Yep.
not, they are unique. Okay, so identity is one path that you guys follow on attacks. What's another path that you guys follow? Because it just can't just be identities, right? You're doing more than that.
Yeah, and so I like to use the term entities because it's a generic term encompassing a lot. So sometimes an entity in an attack path is the user, like we were talking about. Another example of a common entity would be a machine. Another entity would be like an S3 bucket. It's not a machine, it's not a user, it's just kind of the cloud storage area. Another entity is a file or an SSH key. I mean, the list is long. In our supported entities, I think there's about 100, maybe even more than that, where all of these different entities can all be combined together to create an attack path. And sometimes, like I was saying, it's an attack path of 10, but 9 of them are just user, like within the user space. And then sometimes it gets really complex where an attack starts on premise, goes out to Azure, takes advantage of maybe Azure Intune, like that example we were talking about before, goes back over to compromise another machine that then allows you to pivot over to GCP. Then once you're over in the GCP environment, taking advantage of maybe some sort of like trust or permission between AWS and GCP to then compromise AWS. So you get really complicated and you look at all these different types of entities and the different disparate environments, and then you connect them together to assess these paths around how every entity holistically plays together in the risk of every other.
Oh, so wow. I mean, I know because I do this myself. Sometimes I set up those paths myself because obscurity is a form of security, at least we thought.
Yeah.
But it sounds like to me that with tools like yours, I'm sure the bad guys have tools like this too.
Yeah.
That once you get in, they start looking around for paths.
Yeah.
So you can't use obscurity anymore.
Right.
Right. Even if you're hopping between domains or hopping between cloud service providers,
Yeah.
it sounds like you really need something to help you identify these. So let's say, all right, how does it work as a customer? I bring you guys in and it's professional services, or I just let your software just go wild crazy? How does it work? Explain an engagement with a customer.
Yeah, so there's 2 main ways that we get engaged. Sometimes it's just at a high level, I want to discover all my attack paths. And that's a great use case. Sometimes it's, hey, we do pen tests every quarter, we get so much insight in from them. I would like to kind of have these done on a daily basis if I could afford it, but I don't have a budget of $100 million to do a pen test every single day. So sometimes it's just at a high level, I just want to be able to assess my environment. And in that case, when things like Felina or Log4j or Spring4Shell, like those vulnerabilities of the month that kind of pop up under a radar, it is a really strong value for an organization to measure the impact of these vulnerabilities. Like, hey, yesterday there was only 10 attack paths going to this critical asset. Felina dropped on the scene and now I have 100. And so being able to measure how an attacker can operationalize new vulnerabilities in your environment to put your critical assets at risk, that's kind of in line with that first customer. The next customer, when we kind of get engaged, is they'll have a specific scenario. There was a really large bank that we did a POC with last year. They're a customer now, but when we did the POC, they said, we know that our offshore developers have access to one small AWS environment. That's all they should have access to. But we're really concerned that there is some way that they have the ability to abuse maybe different entities in the environment to be able to access production data. So that was a different scenario where they said, I want to start here and see if there's any risk to that. And in that case, it was 2 days later we were saying, yeah, look at how they can abuse this Lambda function. From this Lambda function, they get this role. From this role, they can do what's called a cross-domain assume role capability to then get access to your production data. So for however long that they had this configuration, they had this false sense of security, thinking that because all their offshore developers were relegated to one AWS account.
Well, yeah, they had them in a box.
Like, we're secure. Like, there's no way. So they came to us saying, like, hey, we want to verify this. And so we ran through the simulations and we're able to say, hey, you're not secure. And by the way, it only takes 3 steps to get from here over there. It's very easy. So they stopped the POC, fixed all those things, and then resumed the POC and is now a customer. And so those are kind of the 2 main areas where we start.
So targeted, right?
Yeah.
I have a specific problem. And then also tell me where I'm at. This would, to me, this is kind of screaming for, this would have to be continuously run, because as soon as I add another entity, an S3 bucket, a new person, I could have opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah. Not only just the dynamic nature of cloud, but we also track user behavior in our simulations. So in most environments, I've found that the security score goes up during the weekend, and that's because we've removed the users from the environment. You remove the users from the environment, the score goes up. I mean, every network is more secure without users. So that was one thing that you find. So there's a lot of patterns, not only just, hey, we deployed a new application, or hey, we have some elasticity in our cloud environment. We've got like this expansion that normally doesn't happen, so there's a bigger attack surface. Or like the example I gave, users are doing something different today. What's happening today that is putting us more at a security risk than yesterday?
So it's just not, you're not just doing static analysis of entities. You're also doing dynamic, because you're looking at traffic patterns. You're looking at holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty impressive. Yeah, that is a lot. You said something interesting. It's kind of in jest, but a serious question. You basically said get rid of users off your network.
Well, I mean, for the most secure, conscious organization, limit the number of users. I think that's a really good. It's kind of, if we talk about least privileged principles, I mean, the best way to get rid of privileged principle or implement that is get rid of users. Yeah.
All right. The reason I brought this up is because the OT environment, which is very different than IT, and I'm doing a lot of research right now in OT managed security, and the OT guys are scared out of their mind, right? I think rightfully so, right? Because if someone hacks into your critical infrastructure, people die.
Yeah.
Right. This is a big deal. Yeah. So can you guys help with that pathfinding across the OT IT barriers? Or do I just say there are no identities in the OT network? I don't know if that's an answer.
So going back to that like specific use case where it's a targeted use case, that's a really common targeted use case. We have customers like in the energy sector or anybody really with an OT environment that probably is having the problem, but it's converging. Everything's kind of
Yeah,
converging in
it
the same
is.
networks, and so there's risk to that. And the old school SCADA guys managing their PLCs who thought they were isolated because, hey, this doesn't connect to our network, can no longer say that anymore. So now you've got this problem where, hey, is OT the critical asset or the breach point? If you think about kind of like attack paths, are we getting hacked from these devices or to them? And so we get to calculate that. But to your description, we definitely have that use case commonly played out. Like, hey, is there any way from my IT environment? Let's play the scenario of somebody in HR. If somebody in HR's machine is the breach point, is there any risk to this PLC sitting in my SCADA environment controlling pressure switches that could turn on and off the electricity for some city municipality? So that is a real use case that we can simulate. And if we do find these are the attack paths, it gives you insight to remediate them before an attacker finds
Right.
them and then takes advantage of them.
So this would be really important to run these simulations. So that's another question I have for you. I mean, is this a SaaS offering or is it on-prem? I think SaaS would be a little scary for me personally, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you're gonna store in the cloud somewhere how people can attack me. That's scary, right?
Yeah, so we are a SaaS solution. Early on, we did have an on-premise solution, but it was really hard to keep it updated. Think about how
Yeah,
often
I
we're
would.
constantly adding new attack techniques and new attack vectors, and so it became such a problem for us to constantly be trying to update all these on-prem systems that we eventually said, for us to deliver the best service that we can and constantly stay dynamic with every new vulnerability and attack technique comes out, we have to be SaaS only. And to your point, it is a little scary to think about, hey, there's something in the cloud that has all of our attack techniques. We do a we put a lot of work to make sure all of our data is completely isolated, SOC 2 compliant, and all these different certifications showing that we don't do any multi-tenancy. Everything is in its isolated tenants using AWS, and so we make sure everything is isolated and secure, and we try not to collect anything sensitive. Now, you think about stitching together attack paths and vulnerabilities, like that's sensitive, but if you think about what we're showing you, a lot of it isn't as sensitive as some things like data
Like
sitting in
credit card
files,
numbers.
credit card numbers, PII,
Yep.
passwords. So when we are doing these attacks, it's really common for us to say, hey, we compromise this user account. We have this password sitting here, but we never send anything sensitive to the cloud. What we do is we hash it a bunch of times and only actually send half of or a portion of that hash up to the cloud. So that way we can say, hey, this password is the same as this password over here, so we can leverage it in a way where we can kind of continue to use that password and living off the land from an attack perspective, but we don't have to know what it is. And we try to do that same sort of mentality on everything, where it's if we don't need the actual data, that we'll kind of hash it, obfuscate it, and then just compare it in the cloud. But we have really large referenceable customers, like NASDAQ, for example, is a really big customer of ours. We've got Fortune 50 banks, so you have to, like, the scrutiny that we've gone over to get those type of
You've already
logos.
gone through that. So
Yeah,
yeah, that I bet that was a big
it takes a
leap of
while.
faith for them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's some still
Yeah.
old
So
school thinking where cloud is scary and it's somebody else's computer, and I don't like that. So yeah, I get it. I feel that way, same way a lot of times too.
so I guess here's another quick question. Have you guys moved at all into the government space? In state and local governments or federal governments or national governments. Have you moved into that space yet, or are you still getting a little pushback from them?
You mean just with the cloud adoption?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the cloud adoption.
Yeah, I think so. Most of our customers who are in that space put us through a little bit more of a effort and
The
testing.
ringer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, so like we are owned by a German company, the Schwartz Group that owns XM Cyber. Germany is known for like a lot of really strict privacy laws and things like GDPR and all these different compliance. So there is a kind of an extra layer of scrutiny just because we have to adhere to these type of things like the GDPR in a way that maybe we don't have to as much in different areas in the States. So
Right.
it is definitely something that we have to keep staying in touch with, and different compliance like FedRAMP, for example. If you're playing in federal space and you want a SaaS service that adheres to FedRAMP and stay FedRAMP compliant, like there's a lot of those type of things as well that we continually have to work towards.
So you're already in FedRAMP, you're in GovCloud already?
We're not yet. I think what we are,
Okay.
what do you call it when it's pending authorization? So we don't have the certification yet.
Right.
We're just going through that process.
You're going through, oh, that's good. That's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that I get all this information from you guys. You guys have shown me where all my paths are. Maybe I'm not that sophisticated in my cyber. Maybe I'm a mid-sized company.
Yeah.
Do you guys have like consulting services to help me figure out, all right, you found all these paths and I'm sitting there going, I don't know what to do. I mean, how do you educate me, or can you help me figure out what to do, or point me to a partner? Maybe you guys have a partner that does managed security. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do I do?
So we have both. Every customer of ours gets assigned what we call a customer success manager, and they either have weekly or biweekly meetings where the whole goal of their sessions together is just to take the data that's coming out of the platform and help them like actually use it. If we're just running these theoreticals every single week, but no one's fixing anything, then we aren't really making anything better. So what really,
you're not making any progress.
yeah,
Right?
exactly. So what's really a fun takeaway or a fun outcome of those sessions is commonly those sessions will identify a few things like, hey, this choke point is impacted by this attack technique. These are the steps to remediate it. Do you think we can have this done by 2 weeks from now? And then on the team, they'll assign stuff, open tickets, put it in for that change control window. And then 2 weeks later, we get to now see the impact and say, wow, look, we had this fix. Look how it rippled across all the environment, and your security score goes up. So that's kind of the main way that we address kind of using the solution and not just turning into shelfware. But to your other point, we do have a lot of partners. There's a lot of like managed service partners that we work with who bolt on kind of these attack simulation offerings into their platform and then allow them to have that value. But the perspective it gives them from a managed service like an MDR really gives them a ton of insight into the organization to help them be better at offering those services.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now I have another question. You talked about the entities and all that stuff. What about if I have all of my stuff encrypted? Are you checking for encryption? Because Intel, we've got some cool technology around encryption, like memory in use encryption, right? And SGX. Are you guys looking down at that level too? So even if someone infiltrated, so what? They can't see anything.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting point. We just acquired a company called Cyber Observer, and Cyber Observer kind of is more on the controls and protection aspect of it. So what we did before is we kind of ignored encryption, or we ignored kind of security controls saying, hey, this risk is still here. So what? They ended up being able to download or access an encrypted blob. They shouldn't have been able to do that in the first place, and there's risk to that because, I mean, we're talking about encryption. I mean, we know that the post-quantum world and being able to start breaking encryption is not that far away. So we don't want to have any data loss, even if it is encrypted. So, but now through this acquisition of Cyber Observer has API integrations into different cloud environments, to different security controls, both cloud and on-prem, and now they can assess whether or not, hey, that file that we simulated a compromise on we had a simulation that there was the exfiltration that happened, but Cyber Observer was able to say it was encrypted, so you don't have to worry about it. And then also things like there was these 3 security controls that probably would have made it harder for that to happen. So then we address it and rate our complexity factor. So now with the insight of Cyber Observer, we could say, hey, without Cyber Observer, it looked like this was a really easy attack, but now there's this encryption to break, there's this EDR solution you have to bypass, and so it now, because Cyber Observer told us that, we're going to say that this is still technically possible, but it is something that's going to be more complex than something that doesn't have that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. So without this new acquisition you guys made, it's can I get access?
Yeah.
Basically. Now it's like, oh, I got access, but it's garbage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've always...
I can't understand it, or, whatever.
Yeah. I've always referred to like security controls as safety nets, being like, hey, if something bad happens, this will protect me.
That.
And so we've never really evaluated the safety net in the aspect of security. So we've always said, like, hey, this is possible. You probably shouldn't care if there's a safety net or not. Like, this is something that's bad that could happen, and I don't want to rely on that safety net. You should rely on the actual posture of it in general without kind of falling. So we would address those things first to make sure you never have to leverage the safety net, but now we're at least kind of considering whether or not the safety nets exist and how strong they are, and can they help you, because now we actually have that insight through our Cyber Observer acquisition.
That's pretty cool. That's a nice addition to you guys. Another thing that comes to mind, I don't know if you guys handle this, it's microsegmentation or controlled. I'm talking to a company now called Elicity, really cool stuff where they're controlling at the layer 2 and layer 3, where they're saying, I'm getting rid of VLANs completely, and I'm controlling traffic between devices directly. Do you guys bring that into play too, like on the networking side and microsegmentation, or you say no? I got access, and if these two machines can talk, you're toast.
Yeah. So we do play in that space. Kind of when you were talking about like the targeted use case, that would be one where it's saying like, hey, I want to see like how well my micro or macro segmentation is actually helping
Very
me.
Cool.
So yeah, we do take that into account. The way that we do it is most of the time, if we are saying that there is some sort of attack that's happening between two machines, or there's a vulnerability being exploited between two machines, we'll look at the relevant port number that service runs on and the exploit that it's running on, and we will attempt a three-way handshake to see like, hey, can I talk on that appropriate port number? We don't pass any data, there's no exploit happening, but we are confirming connectivity. So whether you're using Illumio or Guardicore or whatever the micro or macro segmentation solution is, we will be aware of those controls and that limitation. So that way, if there is a vulnerable service running, we will have insight into, hey, these are the only 3 machines in the environment who could actually exploit that vulnerability because of those controls.
That is super cool. You guys have some really amazing technology.
It's fun, it's relevant, and
I would.
It's fun because
it's very raw. I'd be afraid to release it on my home network.
I did that when I first started at XM Cyber. So I've got 4 kids. I know you got a lot of kids, and so it's one of those things where I was able to see which one of my kids' machines puts the most amount of risk to my network storage device. I got a little Synology device where all of my critical stuff is sitting there. So I built all the attack paths and figured out that my daughter Ryland's computer was a choke point because of the way it was configured. So I'd fix those and then made it so that way at least all of the kids' computers' risks are the same.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, there you go. You want to be an equal opportunity parent, right? All the kids' computers are risky.
Definitely, especially the games they play.
the same amount of risk. Hey, Paul, it's been a pleasure. This has been wonderful. I learned a lot. We may probably have to have you come back on the show. Because especially I really want to go deeper into OT. Because that's a scary part for a lot of people today. And I'm, like I said before, I'm doing a lot of research in this area right now. I have a lot of customers bugging me. Darren, what do I do? What do I do? So we most definitely need to talk again more on the OT side.
Next time maybe I'll even pull up in a use case and show you the interface with those OT scenarios. That'd be fun.
Oh, that would be awesome. Hey, thanks again, Paul. Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, Give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and do something wonderful.